Swallowtail, Chapter 23. Amma appeared next to Claire in a pink robe. She needs you. No. Amma could be intimidating, but Claire had reached her limit. Surely you're not going to ignore a plea for help. She's why I'm here. Forget all that blueprint manifesto business. The bottom line is Julia betrayed me. I could still be with them. I wouldn't have been crossing the expressway if she hadn't stabbed us all in the back. Claire knew her anger was about to boil over. No, not with Amma. Why is she pushing me? Claire crossed her arms and stared at her family with a defiant resolve. I can literally wait for an eternity. You, however, have some important decisions to make, and rather quickly, Amma patiently explained. Claire still didn't answer when Amma wrapped her arm around her and pulled her into her purple meadow, but her eyes were drawn to Amma's hand. Another hand began to materialize, its fingers anchored between Amma's. An arm appeared, bare feet, then the pregnant body of a woman, and finally, Julia's grief-stricken face. Claire swallowed hard, crossed her arms and clenched her fists, trembling with anger. She looked incredulously from Amma to Julia and back to Amma again. Julia mouthed the words, "Please help me, Claire." Claire glared at Julia in her hospital gown with her protruding belly. She had a cord, too. You are unbelievable. Claire tried to hide her shock. In all the years they'd been friends, she'd never seen Julia look so awful and helpless. Julia didn't answer. She seemed to have difficulty speaking. Nana materialized on the other side of Julia in a pale blue robe and grasped Julia's other hand. Nana, do you know who this is? Nana nodded somberly. Cal appeared next to Nana, taking her hand in his. He wore a hopeful expression with a yellow robe similar to theirs. What is this, choir practice? An intervention? I haven't done anything wrong, and I haven't been forced to do anything since I got here, aside from that freaky tapestry. So why now, and why her? Claire demanded. Amma shook her head and gave Claire another smile of never-ending patience. You're not being forced to do anything, but consider your options. Come. Some things have changed. I think you're going to be very interested in a new opportunity. Amma extended her hand to Claire. I can't trust her. How can you expect me to trust her? I don't. I expect you to trust us, Amma said, her hand still extended. Claire closed her eyes. She hated feeling so angry in their presence. Felt like she was breaking all the rules. She sensed she was ruining everything, but being asked to help Julia was too much. You cost me my kids, my husband, my life, she yelled at Julia. Julia gave Amma a hopeless look. In one sweeping motion, Amma ran her hand down the front of Julia's hospital gown, which wove itself into a peasant's blouse and a long wool skirt. A kerchief appeared over Julia's hair, which had turned a lighter shade of brown. Julia's features slipped and shifted to reveal a much younger, bruised and bloody face. Claire's heart sank as she recognized the woman from her journey with Gerald into their past. Julia had been the German farm girl Claire had viciously beaten. Claire looked down at her hands and wept, shaking her head. It doesn't make it right. What she's done to me, to all of us, it's still wrong. Amma brushed her hand back over Julia's clothing, returning the woman to her previous state. Then she extended her hand once more. This time Claire took hold of it. Cal took Claire's other hand, and the moment he did, the room filled with a gale-force wind so strong, Claire was powerless to keep her eyes open. When she closed her eyes, she saw two people locked in battle time and again. She tried to open her eyes to escape the pain, frustration, and sadness, but it was impossible. She and Julia had been through many battles throughout many lifetimes, so many that Julia's final betrayal seemed almost minuscule. The group reviewed each heartbreaking conflict at Mach speed. Even more surprising to Claire was the realization that she had been decidedly more calculating and violent, and far less merciful. Julia shouted above the howling wind, "Why have we done all of this to each other?" The wind died down, and Claire was finally able to open her eyes. The 5 of them stood in a circle, still holding hands on a cliff overlooking a tumultuous sea. Waves could be heard crashing on the rocks below. The air smelled fresh and clean. Rippling green grass covered miles of hills behind them. You've been each other's greatest teachers, brutal at times, to be sure, but loving as well. The 2 of you are right where you are supposed to be. Come along now, Amma said as she walked between the 2, grasping their hands. With another tremendous gust of wind, Claire found herself seated at a round table facing Amma, Julia, Nana, and Cal. Claire lowered her eyes, unable to face them after all the ugliness she had no chance but to claim. Remember, Claire, we are not here to judge you or anyone else, only to guide you, Cal reminded her. Claire looked at Julia. Julia responded by somberly staring at her pregnant belly, caressing it with both hands. I don't understand why we didn't immediately hate each other when we met at the bank, Claire said to no one specifically. Amma sat back and folded her hands in her lap. The intensity of the old emotions carry over from time to time, but rarely are you able to discern what those old emotions were. They could be the intense feelings of fear, sadness, anger, jealousy, or love, or all of them combined. It is impossible to unravel such emotions. You each recognized something familiar in the other and simply gravitated toward the familiar. Amma explained. There is a deep mutual love and respect that forms between such formidable opponents. This is a very special day. It takes you thousands of years to reach this point in your relationship. Claire and Julia smiled uncomfortably at one another, and everyone relaxed a little. Claire, Amma began, Julia has reached a critical point in her manifesto, or blueprint, as you call it. The 2 of you are once again at a crossroads. An important opportunity has presented itself for you to end your self-appointed spiritual teaching obligations to one another. The proposal is Julia's. This decision will ultimately be yours. You have the benefit of having 2 members of your collective here today to advise you, should you choose to seek their guidance. Claire sensed an overwhelming surge of love and support rise up around her like a cloud. She glanced at Cal, who gave her a little salute. Nana smiled and nodded, blinking back tears. Where would you like me to begin? Julia asked. Claire finally warmed a little to the sound of her voice. It was stronger now, and Claire realized that she had, in fact, missed her. Where are you on the Earth plane? What's happened? From your cord, I gather you're still alive? I'm in Brazil. I'm in an intensive care unit in Sao Paulo, Julia began. I'm on life support because I've had a cerebral aneurysm. I'm brain dead, she said, with a frankness that caught Claire by surprise. No games, no coy calculations behind the eyes, just the stark truth. How? I holed up in a little coastal town, but I started getting these pains behind my eyes shortly after I arrived. At first I told myself it was stress, that it was psychosomatic. Then I told myself I needed glasses. Finally, I began to experience numbness on the left side of my face and the most horrific headaches of my life. I knew I was in trouble and I had to get to Sao Paulo if I wanted to save my baby. Claire's eyes fell upon Julia's swollen belly. A pang of sympathy finally swimming to the surface. I was living by myself in a little cottage I'd bought in the hills. I never touched the bank's money, by the way. Claire shot her a look of surprise. Actually, I take that back. I touched it a lot. Fondled it is more like it, but I didn't spend a penny. Julia offered them a small, embarrassed smile. Anyway, she continued, when the pain became intolerable, I knew my options were extremely limited because of the embezzlement. My world became very small, very fast. I called a friend of mine in Venezuela, a lawyer. He wanted to fly me out of there, get me to an emergency room, but I refused. He finally agreed to come and stay with me in the cottage until we finished all the legal preparations. I had to protect my baby, and Miguel owed me a favor from way back. So you and the baby are both on life support? Yes, he drew up the paperwork for me to be kept on life support if it came to that. And the expense would be covered, in addition to a generous donation to the hospital. The stipulation was that I would remain anonymous. No questions were to be asked. They'd keep me on life support until I carried the baby to term, and then she'd be delivered. It's a girl, Claire responded, taking it all in, unable to fathom where this was going and what it could possibly have to do with her. As if Julia had been silently cued, she broached a new subject. Alma said Gerald spoke to you before he returned to his body, about your tour of duty in Germany? Yes. He told me that he and Colin and I were stationed there together. We had some sort of pact. Were you part of the pact? Why didn't he tell me? Why don't I remember everything, and she does? Claire asked, directing the question to Alma. It is crucial that Julia be the soul to relate certain pieces of your shared history. Trust the process, Claire. You may continue, Julia. Alma motioned with her hand. The reason you had such difficulty trusting me when I entered your life at the bank was because I had tried to poison the three of you. I was the last surviving member of my family when you found me hiding in the cellar. My brother and father had just been killed. I was still in shock. You took over our farmhouse. You made me cook for the three of you. You found whiskey in the cellar. Claire's eyes were fixed on Julia's. She felt defensive, full of shame and remorse, but she fought hard to keep her head clear and free of judgment, and eventually found her inner student. You were very angry young men, fed up with war and being so far from home for so long, and the drunker you got, the angrier you got, Julia explained. It was becoming too difficult for Claire to separate her emotions. She exhaled loudly with regret and fear of what lay ahead. Alma reached for her hand. No judgment. All souls take a turn at being every kind of person imaginable, and a few unimaginable, in the process of spiritual evolution. Claire bit her lip and nodded. My father had been a veterinarian, Julia continued. I found a bottle of horse tranquilizers in a drawer and tried to slip him into the stew, but Colin caught me. Probably no small coincidence he couldn't stand me this time around. The two women actually laughed at that, and everyone around the table relaxed a little more. You were the most furious with me. I'd planned to drug all of you and burn the house to the ground. You beat it out of me in a drunken rage, Julia stated calmly. You let Gerald write me. Your hair smelled like lye, Claire said, piecing fragmented memories together. There was a shotgun in the closet under the stairs. I shot myself. I'm the biggest reason Colin chose the life of a homosexual this time. He wanted to be an artist, a peacemaker, a mother. But after that day in the farmhouse, he simply couldn't reconcile his desires with the ultimate vulnerability of being a woman. It was a difficult decision for him. But in the end, he found his compromise, Julie explained. God, the four of us must form some hideous knot in the tapestry, Claire whispered. Alma shook her head with certainty. Your threads are no more ugly nor tangled than the rest. Julia shook her head. I felt you'd finally succeeded in taking absolutely everything from me, and that part of me recognized that part of you. That same vibration when we met at the bank, ready to go another round. Of course, Claire whispered more to herself than anyone else. I became determined to take everything away from you one way or another. I'm trying to evolve beyond these kinds of feelings, but my vibration is lower than yours. You're an older soul, more evolved, believe it or not, Julia said, teasing a little. I still have plenty of lessons ahead of me, but you chose a very different path this time. You're closing in on a new level in your progression, your evolution, Julia clarified and looked to Alma for approval. Alma nodded for her to continue. Really? Claire asked, looking at Nana and Cal and finally at Alma. I'm not feeling very enlightened or even human right now. That's to be expected when sorting past lives, Alma said, her ancient almond eyes calm and reassuring. Julia shifted in her seat, straightened up as tall as her bulging stomach would go. I would like to propose that you and I end this cycle here and begin a new one, which will benefit us both. We've learned so much from one another. I have to warn you that this next phase will be much more complicated should you choose to embrace it. I am nowhere near an undertaking of this magnitude on my own path, but I'll be with you every step of the way. Watching over you will play a large role in my own healing and progression to a higher vibration. Not that I expect that to matter to you right now. Claire felt a shift in the energy around them. This was big. She could see it in everyone's expressions. Nana looked like she was about to burst with pride, and Cal clearly wanted her to accept. Alma remained calm and cool as ever, but there was an undeniable twinkle in her eye. A breeze rustled through some dead leaves on the ground, tossing them in the air before they went swirling over the edge of the cliff. Julia placed her hands on the table. I'm offering you the opportunity to rejoin your family. What? I can go back to Paul and the girls? Colin, my mom? How? Claire cried, springing to her feet. Miguel, the lawyer who drew up the agreement for my life support, will be contacting Paul after my baby is delivered by C-section. I appointed you and Paul as her legal guardians, but, well, not knowing you'd been killed. Despite my jealousy, I always thought you were a good mother. The two of you were to raise her, if she went to term. She will, if you accept. You'll return to Paul and the girls through my unborn child, Claire. In your next life, you'll be my daughter. No, that's not what you said. You said I could... Claire cried, searching the faces of Nana, Cal, and Alma, hoping they'd stop Julia from continuing with her lunacy. Nana looked as if she wanted to jump in and save her, but Alma raised a finger, signaling her to wait. Cal's brow creased, and what Claire could only read as frustration. Continue, Julia, Alma said softly. Paul will be your adopted father. He's the best father I know. Your biological father is George from security at the bank, but he'll never know this, nor will anyone. George? No, Claire said, turning and walking away from the table. The grass felt damp and cold beneath her bare feet, jolting her to her senses. Just leave. This is insane. They've all gone crazy. You'll be Em and Anna's little sister, Julia reminded her. Claire's heart caught in her throat. She stopped and turned toward them, speechless and heartsick with a mother's longing. Your name will be Grace. Claire covered her face with her hands and wept unconsolably, as her mind struggled to make sense of the outrageous proposal. Say yes to Grace. Grace is a person, Claire cried. Finally realizing the meaning behind the phrase she'd felt so compelled to chant to Paul, Claire's eyes met Nana's. Is this really possible? Nana nodded eagerly. It's a whole new set of rules, though, hon. It'll be a tough row to hoe, but a good life. One to be real proud of. And it'll propel your spirit right into the infinite, just like your father's. Why? Julia leaned forward with a sense of urgency. My body is being kept alive by machines, Claire. I'm being fed through a G-tube. Grace is barely surviving. She's begun to suffer from malnutrition, and she's not getting the oxygen she needs. You'll have multiple birth defects, but technology's advanced enough that you'll survive. If you're a fighter, and I know you are. What kind of birth defects? Nana cut in. You won't be able to walk or speak. You'll have a weak heart and lungs. Need a couple of surgeries to fix them. Maybe even a heart transplant at some point. Claire frowned as fear rushed through her veins. So strange to know this before you begin. But, Nana said, raising her index finger, her face lighting up, all of your past struggles with trust and control will be put to rest. You'll be healed by having to rely on others to take care of you. You're going to be a world-class teacher when it comes to patience and empathy and love. Come on, Nana. You don't seriously believe I can do this. It's too much. I know you can do it. Your father had his doubts too, but look at him go. He even found you. And there's one more thing. You'll hang on to most of your experiences you've had here. You're going to remember who you were before you were Grace. You'll cherish this gift, this reunion, every day of your life with all your heart," Nana explained, clasping her hands beneath her chin, her green eyes glistening. "Of course, Paul and the girls won't be aware of this," Cal chimed in. "And your relationship with Paul will have a whole new dynamic, but it won't be the first time. You and Paul have been just about everything two people can be to each other." Somehow Claire had known this, and nodded with a twinge of sadness. She hadn't accepted the fact that she'd never make love to Paul again. It had been too painful to think about. But never talking and laughing with him, the way they always had, was far more painful. Alma's lips straightened into a thin, straight line. "It will be exceptionally frustrating at times. However, the positive aspects far outweigh the negative. This is a very rare opportunity, Claire. Few souls return to the earth plane so swiftly. However, your father was also an exception. I want you to take your time, consider every possible element of the equation." Claire thought about everything that had been explained to her. Was this in my blueprint? Alma's eyes softened. "It was your most courageous dream. It will require you to set aside any remaining ego. This is one of the biggest sacrifices a soul can make, and a broad path to the infinite." Nana looked as if she wanted to add something, and Claire worried it was the catch to end all catches. She took a deep breath. "What is it, Nana?" "It's just that most people are going to assume there's nobody home, and even more are going to speak to you and treat you like you're incapable of anything at all. In some ways, you'll be a baby your whole life, totally relying on others, sometimes even strangers, for the most basic things like food, warmth, most important of all, physical contact, love. Don't forget," Julia quickly added, "you'll also be in a much better position to heal your family. Paul, the girls, your mom, even Frank and Colin. Don't forget Michael and Sal, too. You'll be the one that holds them all together and heals their hearts simply by being yourself. I'll be spending a lot of time with Cal learning how to be a spirit guide, now that you and I have finally buried the hatchet. What do you think?" "Sounds okay, except for having no control over a single thing. It's a hell of a price tag, wouldn't you say?" Claire sighed. Nana slapped her hand on the table and laughed. "What a better gift for a dyed-in-the-wool control freak."